Hey, what's going on everybody? J-Mac here. Today's video is going to be on a Helltooth Zombie Bears Firewall variation that should be able to push up to level 70 greater rifts on the live servers. I did a level 66 on stream the other night, and I apologize for the quality of the gameplay here in a few. It may not be the best because again it was taken from my live stream, but I think that with very good gear, optimized build, and maybe over 1,000 Paragon levels on the live servers without the PTR lag, this build should be able to push very high, maybe even get close to competing with Carnival. And really what you want to be doing in a build like this, like a lot of builds really, you want to pull as much as possible. You know, you want a ton of trash mobs around you. For one thing, you get tons of toughness from Swampland Attunement, and this build has very high AoE clear speed with stacking firewalls and spamming zombie bears, along with your mimics from the Grim Reaper also spamming those zombie bears for you. So we're going to get into some mechanics of firewall and zombie bears first, and then we'll go and transition into the gameplay along with the abilities and the gear, Kanai's cube, all that good stuff. So first up, let's take a look at Firewall, and the biggest thing to note with Firewall is that the damage over time effect will actually stack up in one area. So if we were to cast 3 Firewalls in this one area, the enemies right here would take damage from all 3 Firewalls. That DOT would stack up there. And with things like the Jerem's Bracers allowing you to cast it 3 times in a row before the cooldown begins, and buffing the damage by 100%, it gives you really good AoE clear speed, and it's really very good damage on single targets as well. You'll see the damage tick up very high from your firewalls. And if you're running like Grave Injustice and some cooldown reduction on your gear, you're able to just cast a ton of them in one area. As far as Zombie Bears goes, it's probably one of the most rewarding abilities for positioning yourself correctly in the game. The way that it functions, if you position yourself in the proper place, you can really maximize the damage from zombie bears. So normally when you cast zombie bears, the cast animation starts behind your character. But if you were to put yourself with your back against some sort of object, the cast animation will actually start in front of your character, hitting enemies quicker that way. As you can see, the cast animation will actually start in the front like that. The other thing that you got to keep in mind too is against single targets, if you're to put your back against a wall or an object of some sort, you're actually able to get the zombie bears to move in a straight line, making sure that you hit the single target with every single zombie bear from each cast. Whereas sometimes if the zombie bears are spread out a little bit, depending on the hitbox of the mob you're attacking, you may not maximize your damage as much that way. Now getting the mimics to do that is a little bit more of a problem, but getting your own character's zombie bears to go in a straight line is relatively easy if you position yourself properly. One other thing to note with zombie bears is that if you cast them with your back up against a wall like I've been talking about, and the animation starts in front of your character, you're actually able to have the bears travel farther and still in that straight line if you want to maximize your damage against single targets. Now sometimes one of the bears will spawn to the side a little bit, but for the most part you can get them to just go in a straight line like so. That brings us right into the abilities. First off, we have Zombie Charger Zombie Bears, as we've been talking about. This is a poison rune. Summon zombie bears that stampede towards the enemy. Each bear deals 520% weapon damage as poison to enemies in the area. And this is going to be really our main damage dealing ability along with Firewall. It's going to proc half of our Focus and Restraint combo, and we'll be stacking Zombie Charger damage on our weapon, the Scrimshaw, our boots, and possibly the offhand. On the right click, we have Firebomb Pyrogeist. Create a column of flame that spews fire at the closest enemy for 880% weapon damage as fire over 6 seconds. You may have up to 3 Pyrogeist active at a time. And really from my testing, what I've found is that if you drop Pierce the Veil in favor of Grave Injustice, and then you run a Scrimshaw that has at least 45% mana reduction to Zombie Charger, you're able to run a primary that doesn't give you mana back. A lot of people have been running things like the Blazing Spiders and the Mana Toads that you can get mana back with your primary. I don't think you need to do that, and you can opt for something like Firebomb Pyrogeist that gives you way better single target damage. This will proc the other half of Focus and Restraint, and you'll be casting these as well as your mimics. Next up, Piranhas Paranado. I personally think Piranhas is the best in this slot. I like it for pulling mobs together for one thing, grouping them nice and tightly, and the enemies will take 15% increased damage. I think if you're stacking area damage, and yes, in this patch, area damage is quite good, and area damage is dealt in a 10-yard radius, you want mobs to be as close together as possible. So I like the Piranhas in this spot. A lot of people have been running Hex, Jinx instead. Hex gives you pretty good CC, and while the enemies are hexed, they take 30% increased damage. Both of them are options. Decide which one you like the best personally. Wall of Death Firewall. Raise a wall of flame 40 yards wide for 8 seconds that burns enemies who walk through, causing them to take 1100% weapon damage as fire over 4 seconds. This will be buffed by 6-piece Helltooth. It will also be what's proccing 6-piece Helltooth for the entire build. The mimics will cast Wall of Death, and the damage will also be increased by Jerem's Bracers. Again, keep in mind that you can stack Wall of Death on top of itself to maximize damage. Spirit Walk Jaunt. This is mainly there to dodge nasty champion and elite affixes, and also gives you some movement speed when you're moving between packs of mobs. Soul Harvest Languish. This is going to give you 15% more intelligence at 5 stacks, as well as 30% armor, and reduces the movement speed of harvested enemies by 80% for 5 seconds when used. This is a great spell because it does so many things for you. It gives you damage, all resist, armor, and reduces the movement speed of enemies. Now onto the passives. First up we have Grave Injustice. You're going to get mana back for spamming zombie bears, you're going to get life back for some sustain, and then you're also going to reduce the cooldown of your abilities whenever you kill an enemy within 20 yards, and then that 20 yards gets amplified by any pickup radius you have, so the Thing of the Deep offhand is extremely good with Grave Injustice. Swampland Attunement, another passive that's great with the Thing of the Deep. You and your pets gain 120 physical, poison, fire, and cold res for every enemy within 20 yards, and the range of this effect is increased by your gold pickup radius, so that 20 pickup radius on Thing of the Deep gets some serious work there. Now keep in mind this does not give you arcane or lightning resistance, so be very careful around things like thunderstorm and arcane beams. The new passive Confidence Ritual, you deal 25% additional damage to enemies within 20 yards. You should be getting this damage buff the majority of the time. In this build, it's pretty much a melee build. Gruesome Feast, when you're healed by a health globe, gain 10% of your max mana and 10% intelligence for 15 seconds, and the intelligence bonus stacks up to 5 times. Again, another great passive with Thing of the Deep. You're going to get some serious damage out of that intelligence buff, and some all resistance as well. This also gives you mana back for spamming zombie bears. The build runs a 5th passive with a Hellfire Amulet, Spirit Vessel. This is really for the second life, although it does reduce the cooldown of Soul Harvest and Spirit Walk by 2 seconds as well. Next, we're going to take a look at the abilities, and the first thing we're going to do is just go over real quick what the Helltooth set does for the build. So the 2 set reads, enemies hit by your primary skills, Acid Cloud, Fire Bats, Zombie Charger, Zombie Dogs, Gargantuan, Grasp of the Dead, Piranhas, or Wall of Death are afflicted by necrosis, becoming slowed, taking 1500% weapon damage every second and taking 20% increased damage from all sources for 10 seconds. The 4 set reads, after applying necrosis to an enemy, you take 50% reduced damage for 10 seconds. The 6 set reads, after casting Wall of Death, gain 900% increased damage for 15 seconds. To your primary skills, Acid Cloud, Fire Bats, Zombie Charger, Zombie Dogs, Gargantuan, Grasp of the Dead, Piranhas, and Wall of Death. So in this build, what's getting buffed for the 6-piece bonus is Pyrogeist, Zombie Charger, Piranhas, and Wall of Death. Now let's take a look at the individual Helltooth pieces. First up, we have the Helltooth Mantle. In my opinion, an ideal role is going to be Intelligence, Vitality, Area Damage, and Wall of Death damage. Then we have the Helltooth Leg Guards. Int, Vit, Armor, and 2 sockets. As far as the Helltooth Mask, Intelligence, Vitality, Crit Chance, and a socket with a life percentage gem. You could also go Zombie Charger damage instead of Vitality, although I think it's important to get that Vitality roll for your toughness on that slot. Helltooth Gauntlets, Intelligence, Vitality, Crit Damage, Crit Chance. Helltooth Greaves, Intelligence, Vitality, Armor, and then Zombie Charger damage. I got my movement speed from Paragon. Helltooth Tunic, Intelligence, Vitality, it's important to get Wall of Death damage here, and then the 3 sockets. Next up we have the new revamped Scrimshaw that reduces the mana cost of Zombie Charger by up to 50% and rolls with Zombie Charger damage on the weapon. And I went with a Vitality roll. I think that's the best option, getting that up to 1000 Vitality, but there are some other ways you could go with that. Maybe Life on Hit or some other things, but in my opinion, I think the Vitality is probably the best. Thing of the Deep as the offhand. This went with the Vitality and Wall of Death roll. I think that Wall of Death roll could be 3 different things, either Wall of Death, Zombie Charger damage, or area damage. I think all 3 are options, and I'm not sure you would even notice much of a difference between the 3 necessarily, but I'm going to have to play around with it a little bit more to see which one I like the best. But all 3 are definitely an option. The Focus and Restraint rings. Again, part of this is being procced by Pyrogeist, and the other is being procced by Zombie Charger and Piranhas. I went with an Intelligence, Crit Damage, Crit Chance, and Socket roll on both. Hellfire Amulet. Went with an Intelligence, Crit Damage, Crit Chance, and a Socket on the Hellfire Amulet. You could go with an Element on the Hellfire Amulet, but I kind of like the Intelligence just because it's getting buffed by things like Gruesome Feast and Soul Harvest, and you're also running multiple elements in this build. Jerem's Bracers. Wall of Death deals 85% increased damage and can be cast up to 3 times within 2 seconds before the cooldown begins. This allows you to spam your Firewall 3 times in a row before the cooldown happens, and also buffs its damage by up to 100% depending on the roll. I went with a Fire Damage, Int, Vit, Crit Chance roll. Belt of Transcendence with an Int, Vit, Life Percentage Armor roll. This is going to give you 15 Fetish Sycophants that are going to do really pretty significant damage for you. Even though this isn't a dedicated pet build, they still do a lot of damage, especially on single targets, and they're going to tank for you more importantly. That brings us right into the legendary gems. First up, Bane of the Trapped. We're going to have this damage buff pretty much all the time. The 2-piece Helltooth will be giving Necrosis to enemies, which slows them. Esoteric Alteration. You gain all resist out of this, and then while below half-life, your resistances to cold, fire, lightning, poison, and arcane are increased by 75%. And then we're running a second defensive gem in Molten Wildebeest Gizzard. You gain life regen from the first ability, and the second is after not taking damage for 4 seconds, gain an Absorb Shield for 200% of your total life per second. Now, it may be possible to run this build with only 1 defensive gem, but from my testing so far, once you get to a certain point, you have to have the 2 to stay alive. As far as Paragon Points go, get as much movement speed as you need. I don't have any on my gear, so I needed 25%, and then maxed Intelligence. Offense-wise, Crit Chance, Crit Damage, Cooldown Reduction, and then Attack Speed. Defense-wise, Armor Percentage, Life Percentage, All Resist, and then Life Regen. And then utility-wise, Area Damage first, then either Resource Cost Reduction or Life on Hit. If you feel like you don't need the Resource Cost Reduction, then go Life on Hit first. If you feel like you are running out of mana spamming Zombie Bears, then go with the Resource Cost Reduction first, and then the Gold Find. Now let's talk about the Kanai's cube powers. First off, in the weapon slot we have the Furnace. I think this is the best option for high mobility and giving you more elite damage. You already have a very, very good trash mob clear with how much area damage you have with the Firewall and the Zombie Bear spam, so I think this is the best bet. You could also go with a Star Metal Kukri and then potentially either drop Piranhas or Soul Harvest for Big Bad Voodoo Slam Dance on your bar. And you're already running the Belt of Transcendence to proc that. In the armor slot we have the Grin Reaper. The Grin Reaper Voodoo Mask has been buffed significantly in patch 2.3 to the point where the mimics are very powerful. They're going to cast the majority of your abilities. They're going to cast Piranhas, Wall of Death, Zombie Bears, and Pyrogeist. And they actually get buffed by the 6-piece Helltooth now. They also have a really long range in this patch. Then we have the Convention of Elements in the Jewelry slot. It's really just the best standalone ring for damage in the Kanai's Cube. Any build that can run their full set and then not have to run Ring of Royal Grandeur can utilize the Convention of Elements, and it's just a huge damage buff when it rotates around to your element of choice. So there you go, guys. There's the build. I hope you enjoyed it. This is going to be probably my go-to build in Season 4. I'm going to really try to make this competitive with Carnival, if at all possible. So thanks very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like and subscribe as always, and I'll see you next time.